The Australian Financial Review.
Hello, I'm James Thompson, Senior Chanticleer columnist at the AFR. Welcome to our weekly news breakdown of all things business, finance and markets. With me today, as always, he's more productive than the Energizer Bunny with fresh batteries. It's Anthony McDonald. How are you, Anthony?
I'd be more productive with a tax break, James.
Of course you would. This week, we'll reveal why Australia's AI phony war is officially over. We look at the productivity roadmap big business is starting to get behind. And we explain why illegal tobacco has become such a drag for some of our biggest retailers. All right, Anthony, we ended last week's episode on the Chanticleer equivalent of a cliffhanger. The RBA has been hanging out for the inflation data for the June quarter so it can make that final decision and cement a rate cut. What happened?
Well, for all our listeners that haven't slept since last week, James, because of the cliffhanger, there were no big surprises. The number that matters was bang on your 2.7%. That's the trim mean inflation, James. That's the number the RBA prefers. That removes the volatile stuff like fresh fruit and energy, and it's done on an annualized basis. So it looks at the past 12 months. So, James, economists will tell you that 2.7% is great news for borrowers. It's below the prior reading, which was 2.9%, shows you inflation's on the way down and Australia's soft landing perhaps on track. Markets now fully expect the RBA board to cut rates when they meet on August 26.
Yep.
Now, James, I'd just like to point out that 2.7%, that's not quite the midpoint of the RBA's 2 to 3% target range. And I reckon it's a bit early to be popping the champagne corks for listeners with big mortgages. I mean, if you think about what's going on, the inflation number, it shows us that prices are still 2.7% higher than they were last year. And I don't know how much your pay went up in the past 12 months, but I mean, I reckon that 2.7%, it's pretty similar with what wages across the economy have gone up. So I'm not sure that too many people are going to be feeling better off. And I don't know, I'm still a little bit worried that we haven't stamped out the inflation problem. What do you think?
Look, I take your point. I think that the alternative view, though, Anthony, is that the economy is softening. Economic growth is pretty weak. We saw some weaker than expected labour market data a couple of weeks ago. So I think the RBA just wants to provide a bit of support for the economy, and I think that's fair enough. You don't want a little bit of a slowdown to turn into a big bit of a slowdown to turn into something worse than that. And so I think that's why the RBA will be pretty keen to provide some more support to the economy. What grabbed me, Anthony, was, traders are expecting a 100% chance of a cut in August and a 75% probability of a second cut in September and a high probability of a third cut in November. Now, that's the bit I don't quite get. I think Michelle Bullock has done everything except graffiti on the walls of the RBA headquarters. We will be slow in bringing rates down. I wonder if they might wait until into next year to bring rates down to the 3%, 3.1% that everybody expects. I just don't sense they're in any great hurry. I mean, Anthony, it's the same case for the Fed in the US, the Federal Reserve, the RBA equivalent in the US. They're in exactly the same boat, except they're dealing with this giant tariff war that Donald Trump is continuing to inflame. Just as we start to record, there's been a bunch of new tariff levels released across the world. They're sort of, Australia's is 10%, so that's where we were before. That's probably a good result. But generally, this tariff hit is going to come through. It's going to push up inflation in America. The Fed is just saying, well, we've got to wait and see what happens, even though, again, over there, the economy looks softer. So, geez, these central bankers, for so long, they basically didn't make a decision, and now every meeting is live. It's being heavily scrutinised, right?
Yeah, the Fed was good this week, James. It's another one where rates are on hold in July, yet the market's expecting more cuts coming. What did you make of the press conference? Chairman Powell, obviously he's under a bit of heat from Donald Trump. The reporters were asking him about it. What did you think of the way that he handled all the Trump questions?
Oh, I think he's handling it so well. He's clearly a man under pressure. I love the bit that listeners might remember that Trump visited the Federal Reserve headquarters. He's been getting stuck into Jerome Powell about the cost of the renovations there. And he did this sort of incredibly awkward visit to the Federal Reserve where he sort of said, this is costing way too much, basically. Powell was asked about in the press conference and he just said, it was a nice visit. Great to see the president over here. I just thought, that's terrific. I mean, what else can he say? But I think he's handling things well. He's trying hard not to be political. He's trying hard to sort of stick to the script. But I think he's doing it with a bit of a wink to the rest of the world as well. I don't know. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, I liked his answers. He stands up, takes them between the eyes.
Yep.
And, gets through the press conferences. So I thought he did a great job. Now, James, it's no smoking on the Chook Pod here for us, but this week you had a great little story about the amazing change in the way tobacco is sold in this country. We've all read and heard about how organised crime has really taken over the $15 billion industry. I've now got a little tobacconist in our little suburb that's popped up out of nowhere. But we had some fresh data from a big ASX company that showed the problem's getting worse.
Yeah, obviously down in Victoria, Anthony, we're hearing about the sort of tobacco wars all the time.
Yeah.
I think Victoria's been the real epicenter of it. Some really pretty terrifying stuff going on. There was a shooting yesterday.
Jeez.
There's fire bombings. There's all sorts of stuff. It's not very nice. But Viva Energy, which is a big petrol station operator, they own the Shell. They operate the Shell brand here, Ready Express, and a brand that's sort of South Australian based but growing across the country called On the Run. They released some data for the first half of the year, so the June half of the year. So tobacco sales at Viva were down 17%, but so far this year, they're actually down 27% at Viva. So the fall off is accelerating, and you look into why, and sort of, as we said, I'm not a smoker, never have been. I don't think about this very much, but it's a fascinating little sort of economic and socio-economic case study. So why is the drop-off continuing? Well, part of it's just based on price. It's $15 for a pack of illegal cigarettes. You can get them anywhere, absolutely anywhere. Your example about the tobacconist suddenly popping up in your neighbourhood's a good one. It costs $50 to buy a packet at Coles, Woolies, or at the service station or a tobacconist. So the price differential's big. But we've made another series of changes, like in the last month, that are designed to protect our health, but have the impact of changing the market again in favour of illegal tobacconists. So, a month ago, menthol cigarettes were outlawed.
Okay.
And another sort of cigarette, which it's called a fresh burst cigarette, has a menthol ball in the filter. You crush the ball and you get this bit of a minty taste, apparently.
Yeah, right.
That sort of masks the harsh tobacco taste. They were banned too. And you can understand why. The government's saying, we want to make smoking as unappealing as possible. Fair enough. And they also, at the same time, changed the pack size on cigarettes. You can only buy a pack of legitimate cigarettes in a 20-pack. The idea is if you're a pack-a-day smoker, well, you're not going to smoke 50 or 30 anymore. You can only smoke 20. Again, I sort of get the logic. But the problem for the legitimate retailers is the illegal guys, they're not playing by those rules. So you can walk into a little tobacconist or a convenience store or a cafe. I heard this week apparently there's a cafe in Barangaroo where you can buy the illegal cigars. And you can buy a pack of whatever you want. You can buy a pack of 30 or a pack of 50 if you want. And they're a lot cheaper. You can not only get menthol cigarettes and the menthol fresh burst cigarettes, but you can get fresh burst cigarettes that taste like apple and raspberry and blueberry. We outlawed those decades ago, but they're here with the illegal trade. And so you have this amazing situation where the retailers, the legitimate retailers are telling me that illegal tobacco is now 50% of the market.
Wow.
And nobody knows quite what to do about it because enforcement, or, trying to wipe out the illegal trade, that's a state government issue, right? But who gets all the excise from cigarettes? The federal government. So the state government's been asked to tackle this costly rising crime problem, but with no funding to do so. It's sort of falling between the cracks. And, crims have been able to step in and seize control. And this stuff is everywhere. It's out in the open. It's a almost legitimate illegal business.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't quite know what the solution here is. Probably it's better law enforcement. You need to try and break these gangs. There's been suggestions that we need to drop the excise on legal tobacco to make the price differential less vast. The Treasurer Jim Chalmers has ruled that out. I don't know what the solution here is, but we have this weird thing where a legal industry is being completely taken over by criminals right under sort of all of our noses. Well, actually, it's not even under our noses. It's happening in plain sight.
Yeah. A lot going on there, James. I didn't realise they'd banned the Bacardi Breezes of the smokes world and turned 24 can slabs into 18 cans. Did you see that report from Morgan Stanley this week? They were talking about the supermarkets and how many cigarettes they sell compared to a decade ago.
Yeah.
Cigarette sales there have been going down 15% a year for about the past 10 years. Now, if you compound that 15% drop every year, James, for those listeners whose maths is not their favourite subject, that compounding, that means about $100 worth of sales 10 years ago is worth about $25 now. Like the sales have just fallen through the floor. I mean, it's an astonishing drop, James. I mean, do you think the supermarkets will be at the stage where they'll be saying, is it even worth selling tobacco? And what do you think they could do with those little counters instead? Do you reckon they could have a little coffee shop there, a little bakery, or maybe even a scrumptious little GYG?
Oh, Anthony, I like the entrepreneurial thinking here. My mail is that the supermarkets are seriously thinking about their future in tobacco.
Yeah.
Not just because the sales are so small, but because there's a lot of hassle that goes with it. You've got to store these things properly. You've got to check IDs. You've got to expose your workers to a bit of risk because cigarettes are if you can steal even legitimate cigarettes, you're going to be able to sell them easily in this black market, this huge black market. So that's created a lot more violent crime around legitimate tobacco sales as well. So it's a totally wicked problem, but one that as a non-smoker I don't think about, but I hope someone's thinking about it because the crime that we're seeing around this is getting out of control. And, innocent parties are being hurt. I mean, who's going to want to work in a service station or in a tobacconist? I mean, it's just awful, but I don't know where this ends. So anyway, one to watch.
Yeah.
Let's get to our first topic of the week. And it's officially August now, which means Treasurer Jim Chalmers' Productivity Roundtable is now only weeks away. There's been a lot of talk about the whole thing, and I guess plenty of skepticism it's just going to be a talk fest. But look, we had another round of submissions this week from the likes of Ryan Stokes at Seven Group, from Westpac and from McKinsey, the big consulting firm. And I reckon we're starting to see some pretty good ideas come through here. People are really leaning into the process and taking it seriously, which is good. Anthony, have any of the ideas really tickled your fancy?
James, it's pretty easy to be cynical on this one. I mean, the irony of our biggest companies having no doubt dozens of meetings and 40-page submissions and the like Westpac's. We can only imagine how much hot air and kilowatt hours and probably even AI went into it. But in the spirit of productivity and positivity,
yes,
I am promising to keep an open mind over the next 3 weeks on this roundtable, James. And I think we're seeing some common themes come into the debate now, right? I mean, we're seeing a few of these submissions, and having done the annual Chanticleer survey for the past couple of years with you, James, a lot of the ideas are things that have been kicking around the business sector for a while, but now they are taking the chance to put them on the table, which is good, right? I mean, that's the whole point of this thing. So I think, the main ideas seem to be clustering around streamlining planning rules, between states and the feds and local councils, just making it easier for developers, accelerating the energy transition. Once again, that comes back to approval processes. It comes back to funding at federal levels versus state levels. Maybe recognising the fact that we have a national electricity market and maybe state-based schemes are not the best idea. I thought Westpac's idea about identifying up to 10 regional cities for targeted investment and growth was a great one. Like, imagine if we had, say, Wagga in New South Wales, which has 70,000 people, or Ballarat down your way, which has 120,000 people. Imagine if we turn them into bigger cities, right?
Yeah.
If you took like a few decade view and you wanted to increase population 5 times there, 10 times there, and how that could really help rather than just jamming more people into Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. which is sort of the way that it's gone for the past couple of decades. So I thought that was a great idea. Other than that, we're seeing calls for investment in skills, AI, and of course, there's been lots of talk about tax as well, which perhaps that'll be too ambitious for this roundtable, James. But I think we have a unique opportunity to at least plant the seeds of change within the broader community and hope that it can blossom into some more meaningful action.
Yeah.
Which submissions caught your eye?
Yeah, I really agree on the Westpac regional, the next round of cities one. I think that's a really good idea. Think about how you change the jobs market and potentially the housing market if you've got bigger regional cities and more infrastructure. Look, I know every fibre of my cynical being wants to sort of dismiss this, but despite myself, I'm actually becoming a little bit optimistic, Anthony.
Oh, good.
We're starting to get the building blocks in place here. If you think about, we had Commonwealth Bank's submission, which CEO Matt Comyn was all over. He's given us the sort of overarching vision here. What's productivity about? It's about doing more with less so our kids and grandkids have better living standards than we did. I reckon we can all get behind that. What's the goal we need to get? Well, I think McKinsey came up with that. $130 billion in extra private investment. That's what we got to do to make the economy more productive and get that boost to living standards we want to see. That's not easy, but how do we get that? Mm-hmm. Well, there's lots of good ideas, but the central one is we need to get out of our own way. We need to streamline planning and approvals. Everyone agrees with it on everything, whether it's housing or energy infrastructure or traditional infrastructure. Everyone says the red tape's too much. I mean, this has got to be the low-hanging fruit. I think Ryan Stokes had the idea of a national desk for approvals. If you got a project, you go to one place and you get all the approvals, state, federal, local, wham, bam, you're done. Now, I know it's easy for me to say. I totally get that. But, if we think there's a crisis in energy, and we think there's a crisis in housing, and we think there's a crisis in productivity, let's just get on and do this stuff. Let's not come out of the round table and say, well, yeah, okay, now we're going to do a 3-year study into whether this could work. I think lots of people would be rapt if we came out and said, this is what we're doing. And okay, that maybe that requires the government to sort of come to the round table with some fixed ideas. I think there's enough good ideas out there that they can pick and choose a few and say, right, it is clear that planning and approvals are stuffed. We are going to fix them. We think it's at a crisis point. We're taking it over. We're going to do this. Everyone get behind it. We know it's not going to work exactly as you want it. You're going to have to give and take a little bit. Let's get on with it. I'm being way too optimistic that will happen. But I think we've got sort of enough agreement across these submissions that we're starting to see the path forward. But Anthony, I wanted to run this new idea from the Productivity Commission past you. Okay. They've come up with a really big one, a real sort of game changer. They're proposing to essentially have a 2-tiered company tax system. Mm-hmm. So if you earn under $1 billion in revenue, you pay 20%. If you're over $1 billion, you stay at 30% as you do now, but everyone has to pay a new 5% tax on cash flow. Now, that's mainly going to be paid by the big businesses, about 500 in total, and they will effectively fund the company tax cut for the small and medium businesses. The idea is that you give small and medium businesses a chance to get bigger and compete with the big guys. You add more dynamism to the economy, you get more investment, you attract more foreign capital. Do you think it could work?
It's interesting, and it also looks like a bit of a proprietary 1-2 punch, which is great. I mean, this is the time to get the ideas on the table. A tax like this, it's clearly a tax on big business. Big business pays more, end of story. And I mean, what do we think about that? I saw your column about it, deliberately hamstringing big business carries risk from a global perspective. And true, I mean, politically though, I think it'd be pretty popular. I mean, you can hear the big CEOs howling and they'll be saying, who do you think owns big business? And what does it mean for Australian superannuation account balances? But, it's to that I say, yeah, sure. I mean, that's true. But, the next time you make a dumb decision and waste shareholders' money on an acquisition or something, I'll ask you to stand up and say sorry to the poor superannuants who you're working on behalf of. So, James, look, at the end of the day, someone has to give in this debate, right? The Productivity Commission argues that if you cut tax for small to mid-sized businesses, you'll get more bang for your buck. Hence why they're suggesting the widening of that 2-tier system that we have already and really jamming more businesses onto the lower tax rate. I think it's good, James. I think it's refreshing. I do buy their argument that that's where the dynamism is in the economy, that they're more likely to spend it and that there is a chance that they invest more and grow up and take on these big businesses, get more competition, and that's what should be good for the economy. At the end of the day, the problem we're really trying to address in all of this is business investment, which is appallingly low. It has flatlined at about 10% of GDP for the past 15 years. If you exclude mining, it used to be more than 12%. That 2% difference is massive. So the theory is you need the private sector investing in new things, projects, products, systems to be more productive. And big business, particularly in the last couple of years, James, I'd say, they've not been capital constrained yet. Business investment is extremely low. Why? I mean, they might argue it's the policy settings, but you can equally argue that, look, cost of capital's been great, access to capital's been great, and yet they haven't really been investing that much. So maybe the Productivity Commission thinks they've missed the chance, or we at least need to encourage the up-and-comers, the whippersnappers to come and nip at their heels and get everyone fighting harder and being more productive. But the big change, though, is that 5% tax on next cash flow. And I must admit, I need a bit more time to get my head around this one, James, because it's a big change. The tax system's set up around this accrual accounting, which is all about taxing profits based on revenue earned and expenses incurred, regardless of going to cash accounting, which is all about whether cash goes out the door. This change, they're saying, is all about let's shift to the cash out the door. So if you spend money on a capital expansion project this year, you get the benefit of tax this year.
Yes.
Now, it's a really big shift. But look, James, this report, it's another reminder that if we're going to fix the tax system, there will be winners and losers.
Yeah. Someone's got to make a sacrifice. I think big business can generally understand that. But geez, it's a big sacrifice to make. Effectively, Anthony, we're asking big business to increase the tax they pay to 35%.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, at the end of the day, that's basically it, right?
Yeah.
Now, 35% is not even the ballpark of international comparison. And I think that's the one thing that I reckon is missing from this Productivity Commission idea and from the debate a bit generally. A lot of it is focused domestically. You know, I get Australia's an island, but we're not disconnected from the rest of the world. That's why we're panicking about Trump's tariffs. So, you know, most of our big business, our biggest employers, our biggest investors, our biggest taxpayers, they are global businesses exposed to global markets and with opportunities to invest around the globe. That's the bit I struggle with. If you're BHP and you're choosing to whack the next $15 billion in a project in Australia or in a project in Argentina, that's a real life example. If the tax rate here goes up 5% and in Argentina you're getting all sorts of incentives thrown at you to invest, your decision's pretty easy. Now, maybe there is enough investment across over time in the small and medium business sector to make up for that. But geez, it's a risk. It's a real risk. And I think you'd want to see a hell of a lot more modelling before something like this is adopted. I agree with you. I think there's logic to this. There's a sort of bang for your buck element to it that is really interesting and quite attractive. But productivity is often driven by a handful, a very small number of large, high-growth, dynamic firms. And my concern is that we would be hamstringing those large, dynamic, high-growth firms with this tax. And that is a risk. Maybe it's a risk worth taking, but I think we should recognise that it is a risk.
Yeah, let's just see how it plays out, James. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to decide, what do we prefer? You know, is the tax going to come from more income tax? Is it going to come from a tax on assets? Is it going to come from a tax on super? Does it come from a higher GST? Or do we stick it to big business, right? It's going to have to come. You're going to have to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And that's what this next few weeks is probably going to be about.
Yeah, indeed. Well said.
Well, James, that's a great segue to our second topic of the week. And this week, the artificial intelligence phony war officially ended when Commonwealth Bank cut 45 call centre jobs, officially telling staff it was due to AI. James, we think it's one of the first real public bits of job cutting directly linked to AI. So do you think, did this feel like a bit of a moment?
I reckon it did. Yeah, we've heard a lot about AI. We've heard the likes of Matt Common and Telstra CEO Vicky Brady tell us about how AI would lead to smaller workforces over time. But this is pretty direct. CBA saying, yep, we've got an AI voice bot that can answer most of our customers' low-level queries. We're cutting 45 jobs because of it. I mean, that's a pretty sort of bold statement about how AI works. You put this into context. CBA's got 38,000 people, 3,000 people in their call centres, right? So 45 jobs numerically is not a lot. But look, they're 45 people with 45 different families and probably, 90 dependents possibly relying on them. So there's a human factor here that I reckon is important. I think this is just a bit of a wake-up call. Like, this is how it's going to go. I spoke to an ASX 300 CEO on Thursday, and they were telling me, it hasn't been many AI job cuts. Basically what's happened is AI has made our people 10% to 20% more efficient. You say, oh yeah, that sounds fantastic. So have you been hiring? Nah, our headcount's down over the last 12 months, but our sales are up 23%. And you sort of sit back and go, yeah. Yep. So, okay, AI hasn't cost any jobs, but it has meant that there's been the creation of no jobs, even though your business has got bigger. You keep talking to that person, they say, yeah, there's 500 people working in the Philippines who are working on low-level customer queries. Yeah, I can see AI replacing them in a couple of years as well. So I think this stuff's happening. It's sort of real and it's here. We're seeing it in some of the leaders, like probably no big corporate has done more to invest in AI than CBA. So maybe they're at the tip of the spear in a way, but I don't know, Anthony. I think it's happening. And what was interesting to me is we had the CBA job cuts, and then we had the response from the Australian Council of Trade Unions. And they're going to go to this productivity roundtable asking for a new set of mandatory enforceable agreements. And those would force employers to consult with their staff before AI technologies can be introduced, and they would, include guarantees around job security and skills development and retraining that even need to be ticked off by the new National AI Authority, whatever the hell that would be. Now, Anthony, I hear this and I sort of go, look, this is, talk about trying to shut the gate after the horse has bolted. Like, this is silliness. But then I also think about it, and I can get where the unions are coming from. And if we had not 45 job cuts from AI across the economy, but 45,000 or 450,000, these things that the ACTU are talking about, that's exactly the sort of calls that the government will get, won't they? That's the intervention the governments will be asked for.
Oh, definitely. I 100% understand where they're coming from, James, but it doesn't mean I'm 100% listening. They're trying to protect workers' jobs, workers' families, mortgages, help them keep bread on the table right now and into the future. Unions make their money from the workers. They're doing their job here, but let's realize this is a balancing act. It's a balance between the workers and the bosses, or the workers and the capital, as they say. And you can't have the tail wagging the dog on this, James. I don't think it's up to the workers to really, turn over the workplaces just because AI is about to come through. I mean, we've just spent the past 20 minutes or so talking about productivity, and if we're going to be serious and we're going to be adult about this, we're going to have to realize that job cuts are going to feed into that, right? Productivity is about doing more with less. But in doing that, we have to trust that it's going to open opportunities in other parts of the economy or other parts of those workplaces where people can be employed. And if you step back, and I think that's what's going on here, James, and I think that the unions, yes, they should get a say in how AI is used in workplaces, or at least be consulted on it.
Yeah.
But they also have an obligation to go to their members to explain what the goal is here, James. And the goal is productivity. It's about boosting living standards. And in doing that, we're all going to have to do something, and hopefully we can all pull in the same direction and grow the whole pie for everyone. And yes, someone's going to lose their job along the way. Maybe it's going to be me. Maybe it's going to be you. Maybe I'll regret saying this. But, we've got to trust that both sides are going to have to work together on this. And if they don't, it's just not going to work, James. We're going to flatline. And if any of the workers need any extra motivation, go back and look at the Bible, which is the 2023 intergenerational report, James. And look at the economic growth forecast for the next 40 years, 2.2% of real growth a year, and realize that is less than the 3.1% in the 40 years before that. And think about that 1% difference. Think about what that means for your lifestyle, your living standards, your kids, your grandkids. There's something worth fighting for here, James. And, the unions love a fight, but I think they realize that they have a role to help sort of, explain what's going on.
Yeah. Anthony, can I bring in a reader question here from Sean from Victoria, who asked a couple of connected questions via the website. So he's sort of talking about this wave of AI-related redundancies. How much of it is just classic cost-cutting management by who are taking advantage of a so-called crisis? And secondly, at what point does the government step in and call out organisations behaving like this when it's known that customers are sticky? So, but basically, I think Sean's getting to that point that perhaps the Productivity Commission's getting to too, that we have a few businesses that are very big and very powerful. Does the government need to call them out? What do you reckon?
Yeah, good question. And I guess something that Matt Common's going to have to be prepared to talk about at CVA's results on August 13. I agree with Sean. I mean, it's hard to argue. I think the customers are going to be better served by bots. I mean, let's be honest, this is about cost. It's about cost-effective service. I mean, the best customer service you could offer, James, would be like a one-on-one human or team of humans following around every customer and offering them financial advice, tax advice, banking advice, all that. Give them their own Warren Buffett. But, it's not happening, is it? And why? And that's because it's too expensive. So, I mean, this is about cost-effective customer service at the end of the day. So I think, we can be realistic about that. And there's the second part of the question, I mean, should the government step in here? I don't think that's appropriate. I mean, if the customer service is so bad, customers are going to do something about it, right? They'll leave their banks. And if there's one thing that I know Commonwealth Bank, the other banks, the big utilities, et cetera, don't want, it's customers walking out the door. And as soon as you get customers walking out the door en masse, I guarantee you there'll be changes if the service is that bad. They love their market share stats. It's easier for them to retain customers than win new ones. So I think let the market work this one out. I don't think that getting the government involved is the right way to do it.
Can I just finish this by flipping the question on its head a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
In most technological changes that we've seen, who do you reckon gets the benefits of the increased productivity or the increased efficiency that is brought? Do you think it's companies or do you think it's customers?
I hope it's customers.
I mean, if you look at the bank's margins over the last 20 years, the improvements in technology like mortgage broking and, more use of data and analytics, it's gone to customers. The bank's margins are slimmer than they were, much slimmer than they were a little while ago. I'm not saying they're not still quite fat and quite healthy, but they're slimmer than they were. So I think it raises an interesting question. Will we be prepared to pay more? Will we even favour companies that we know are using humans over AI because it's a sort of right thing to do? Or will we do what we usually do and just happily take the cheaper service and accept that maybe it's a little bit worse, maybe it's involves a few less humans? I don't know. I'm just saying that's an interesting sort of idea that if company A is using AI and making its products cheaper, where would the government intervene? Can you please stop doing that? And lift your prices 20% at the same time.
We know what Jim Chalmers thinks about inflation.
Exactly. So this is a great example of the debates and the sort of fun we're going to have over the next few decades. I think it's hugely messy and it's hugely interesting. All right, Anthony, we'll come back after the break. We're starting one of our favourite periods of the year, reporting season. Back in a sec. Welcome back. If you want to know more about what we're talking about today and a whole lot more, AFR subscribers can sign up to the Chanticleer newsletter at join.afr.com/Chanticleer. Every Saturday morning, the newsletter pulls together the best Chanticleer columns from the week and delivers them straight to your inbox. All right, Anthony, looking ahead, one thing tonight to watch out for is US jobs data. Comes out about 10:30 on Friday night, full report on afr.com and on Saturday morning. So that could be interesting to get a sense of, there's a bit of softness in the US labour market. Is it continuing? And then a results season, the August results season, which we love, Anthony, starts to pick up next week. I guess you might call it the soft launch. On Wednesday, we've got results from Pinnacle Investments and REA Group and News Corp. And Thursday, AMP, the sort of the legend of Australian financial services, is up as well. Should be sort of interesting, Anthony. The real action starts the following week, but we get a little entree here.
That's right. A few of the early birds. It'd be good to see what's to come from the rest of the ASX.
Yeah, and with tariffs all the rage at the moment, manufacturing activity gauges are out around the world in the middle of next week. So we'll get a bit of a guide to how tariffs are influencing activity and trade flows, which is one to watch out for. Well, we had a great question from Sean before the break, and we've got another question. We love questions here at the Chanticleer podcast. This week we've got one from Gundy Royal, who's living in Paris. If you've got a question you want to send in, you can email us at chanticleer@afr.com. You can also send your question in audio form. Just record a voice memo on your phone and include your name and where you're from and email it to us. Or you can use the widget on all the Chanticleer articles at afr.com. So Gundy asks, "Hello, Chooks. I listen from France every week and marvel at the Ponzi scheme that is housing in Australia. Why is the average new build in Australia 242 square metres and it hasn't changed since 2010? Why not build small houses which are more affordable and leave more land for trees to lower ambient temperatures?" Now, Anthony, that's a good point. I had a mate who's living in Berlin at the moment. He says it really changes your perspective on why all Australian houses are so big. Everyone lives in an apartment in Berlin and seems to get along just fine. Is Gundy right here that we need to think differently about house sizes?
Well, it's just about market demand, James. It's what sells, and what sells determines what the developers will build. So, sure, if you can wave the magic wand and get us to all of a sudden wake up tomorrow and make us want to buy smaller places and then that can feed through the system, then great. But for now, I want to live in a big house, and I think that's a view that sort of permeates through the economy. And we even see people that come to Australia, even from countries where they live in units that like owning and living on a bit more land here in Australia as well. So I think it's just what the market's demanding.
Yeah, I think, Gundy, we will see a bit of change over time. I mean, I think the push at the moment is all about increasing density around in the right spots. So, around transport hubs and in really populated areas, bringing that density up. So we're offering more styles of housing in different ways, in different places, different options for people. So I think over time we will see that change. There's always a balance, though. We had a great article in the paper last week by one of our reporters, Miriam Robin, Anthony, on the sort of Australia's fertility crisis and the global fertility crisis. Our birth rates are down. We want big families. Where do you need to put big families in big houses? So, but I think it's about making sure the mix of property options and housing options is right. So I think Gundy raises a good point that you can change the mix and get a bit more density in there, to do things in different ways. Not everyone's going to need that big property, and perhaps we haven't been as good as we could be at offering those different options. So
yeah, that's right. We just need there's plenty of big places out there. We just need to recycle them better through the community. Yes.
I wouldn't mind a quick stay in a Parisian apartment, by the way, for a couple of months, perhaps to take in the ambience. But we'll leave that for another day. Anthony, it's been a huge week. It's almost our Christmas period with reporting season upon us. So can't wait to dig into that with you in the next few weeks.
Yeah, thanks for another great discussion, James.
Thanks for listening, guys. See you next week. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing or giving the podcast a review, as it helps other listeners find us. And don't forget to follow wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com. You can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. Chanticleer was hosted by me, James Thompson and Anthony McDonald, and it was produced by Alex Gow and Mandy Coolin. Our theme is by Alex Gow, head of premium content is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.